The Fish and the Frogs. Chapter 1. Life in the Pond. In the heart of the green hollow forest, nestled between ancient trees and wildflowers, lay a vast and beautiful pond. The pond was home to all sorts of creatures, each with its own way of life. The frogs, with their slimy green skin and croaking voices, ruled the marshy edges. They leaped from lily pad to lily pad, basking in the sun and feasting on insects. Deeper in the water, away from the reeds and the shore, lived the fish. They swam gracefully beneath the surface, shimmering in the sunlight that filtered through the water. The leader of the fish was an old, wise carp named Oren. He had lived in the pond for many years, and his scales had turned silver with age. He was respected by all fish, from the tiny minnows to the powerful pikes. The frogs and the fish lived in the same pond, but they rarely interacted. The frogs believed that because they could live both in water and on land, they were superior. They often mocked the fish, calling them prisoners of the deep. One particularly hot summer, when the water level began to drop and the pond grew smaller, tensions between the fish and the frogs started to rise. Chapter 2. The Frog King's Boast. At the edge of the pond, on the largest lily pad, sat Brutus, the self-proclaimed king of the frogs. He was larger than most frogs, with warts covering his bumpy skin and a deep, croaking voice that made the smaller frogs tremble when he spoke. One evening, as the golden sun cast long shadows over the pond, Brutus gathered his subjects and puffed out his chest. "Listen well, my fellow frogs. We are the true masters of this pond. We can leap upon the land, breathe the open air, and return to the water at our will. Unlike those pathetic fish, who are trapped beneath the surface, we are free." The other frogs cheered, their croaks echoing across the pond. "Yes. We are the rulers of the water and the land." Brutus continued, "These fish swim around like mindless fools, believing their old carp to be wise. But what wisdom is there in never knowing the feeling of soft earth beneath your feet? In never tasting the sweet air above?" As the frogs laughed and cheered, Oren, the old carp, overheard their boasting. He swam closer to the surface and called out in his deep, calm voice. "Brutus, your words are bold, but your pride blinds you to wisdom. We fish may not walk on land, but we understand the water better than any frog ever could. The pond is our home, just as it is yours. Shouldn't we work together instead of mocking each other?" Brutus scoffed. "Work together? What could a fish possibly teach us? You are slow, helpless creatures, bound to the water forever." The younger fish, who admired Oren, felt anger rising in their fins. But Oren only sighed and dipped below the water. He knew that prideful creatures seldom listen to reason. Chapter 3. The Storm and the Dry Season. The days passed, and summer grew hotter. The pond, once full and deep, began to shrink under the relentless sun. The fish found themselves struggling for space, their once vast home now reduced to a small pool in the center. Then, one night, a great storm swept through the forest. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, and the wind howled like a hungry wolf. The pond swelled, and the banks overflowed. In their excitement, the frogs leaped onto the higher ground, enjoying the wet and wild night. By morning, the storm had passed, but it had left a lasting mark on the pond. The rushing water had created a new stream, leading away from the pond and toward the river beyond the forest. The frogs rejoiced. "This is a sign," Brutus declared. "We have been given a new path to explore. We can leave this small pond and rule over the land beyond." Some of the younger frogs were hesitant. "But this is our home," one of them said. "Shouldn't we be cautious?" Brutus scoffed. "Foolishness. This is our chance for greatness. Let the fish stay behind in their shrinking puddle. We will take the land." Without waiting for another word, Brutus and many of his followers leaped away, following the muddy stream toward the unknown. Chapter 4. The Harsh Reality. For days, the frogs traveled away from the pond. At first, it was exciting. The air smelled different, the earth was soft beneath their webbed feet, and new insects buzzed all around. They feasted and leaped forward with confidence. But as they ventured farther, the land became drier. The air grew hotter. The soft, wet ground turned to cracked, hard earth. The insects became fewer, and small puddles they had relied on for water dried up under the sun. The frogs began to suffer. Their skin, which needed moisture, dried and cracked. They grew weaker, their movements sluggish. Brutus, who had once boasted of their superiority, now struggled to lead. His croaks were hoarse, and he felt his strength waning. We must go back," one of the frogs croaked weakly. Brutus hesitated. His pride told him to push forward, but his body told him otherwise. "Fine," he rasped. "We return." But the journey back was even harder than the journey forward. Many frogs, too weak to continue, perished along the way. By the time Brutus and the few survivors reached the pond, they were shadows of their former selves. Chapter 5. A Lesson Learned. When the battered frogs returned, they found the pond smaller than before, but not lifeless. The fish, under Oren's guidance, had survived by digging deeper into the mud, finding pockets of water where they could remain safe. The younger frogs, who had stayed behind, had learned to adapt as well, making use of the shade and staying close to the water's edge. When Brutus staggered onto the bank, Oren swam up to him. "Brutus," he said, his voice kind but firm, "it seems your journey was not as glorious as you had hoped." Brutus, too weak to argue, simply bowed his head. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I thought we were greater than the fish, because we could leave the water, but I did not see the wisdom in staying where we belonged." Oren nodded. "Pride is a dangerous thing. It blinds us to the truth. The pond is not just yours, nor just ours. It belongs to all who live here. Only together can we survive." Brutus, humbled at last, agreed. From that day on, the frogs and the fish no longer saw each other as rivals, but as allies. They shared the pond, respecting each other's strengths and weaknesses. As the seasons changed and the rains returned, the pond flourished once more. And though Brutus still croaked loudly from time to time, he never again claimed that the frogs were the masters of the pond. Pride and arrogance lead to downfall, while wisdom and cooperation ensure survival. The end.
Please subscribe for more practicing English by informative content.